As the court pleases, that the accused is guilty of the crimes of murder, count 1, count 2, murder, count 3, murder, count 4, attempted murder, and count 5, defeating or obstructing the administration of justice. In that the accused is allowed Tuesday, 27 January 2015, and at or near 12 Koske Street, the Zalse Winelands Golf Estate in the district of Stellenbosch, unlawfully and intentionally, count 1, killed Henri van Breda, an adult male, by hitting him repeatedly with an axe or similar sharp object and or inflicting other violence unknown to the state. Count 2, killed Martin van Breda, an adult male, by hitting him repeatedly with an axe or similar sharp object and or inflicting other violence unknown to the state. Count 3, killed Teresa Jacoba van Breda, an adult female, by hitting her repeatedly with an axe or similar sharp object and or inflicting other violence unknown to the state. Count 4, attempted to kill Henri van Breda, a female who was 16 years of age, by hitting her repeatedly with an axe or similar sharp object and or inflicting other violence unknown to the state. And further, that the provisions of Act 105 of 1997 are applicable in that counts 1 to 3, the offences are specified in Part 1 of Schedule 2 of the said Act, in that the murder was planned or premeditated and that a minimum sentence of life imprisonment is therefore applicable. Count 5, that the accused with the intent to defeat or obstruct the cause of justice committed an act or acts to wit inflicting injuries to his person and or tampering with the crime scene and or supplying false information to the police in order to mislead the police as to the true identity of the perpetrator, which act or acts defeated or obstructed the administration of justice, the penalty to which is in terms of provision 276 of Act 51 of 1977 in the discretion of the court. Those are the charges below.
Mr. Van Breda, how do you plead to count 1 as indicated by the prosecuting counsel? Count 1 relates to the murder of the adult male Henri van Breda. Not yet. Count 2, the murder of the adult male Martin van Breda. Not yet. Count 3, the murder of Teresa Jacoba van Breda. Count 4, the attempted murder of Martin van Breda. Not yet. Count 5, the attempt to defeat or obstruct the cause of justice. Rather, I noted that we are not guilty this way of all the counts. Mr. Donald.
Court pleases, my Lord, Mr. Van Breda's plea is in accordance with his instructions to us. We have prepared a written plea explanation. I beg leave to hand up a copy to your Lordship and the learned Cecil, as well as to my learned colleagues. Count 1, I plead not guilty to this charge of murder. I further refer to the contents of paragraph 6 to 65 below. At count 2, I plead not guilty to this charge of murder. I further refer to the contents of paragraphs 6 to 65 below. At count 3, I plead not guilty to the charge of murder. I further refer to paragraph 6 to 65 below. At count 4, I plead not guilty to this charge of attempted murder. I further refer to the contents of paragraphs 6 to 65 below. At count 5, I plead not guilty to this charge of defeating or obstructing the administration of justice. I further refer to the contents of paragraph 6 to 65 below. General averments, introduction. The averments contained hereunder are made to explain why I plead not guilty to the charges against me. It is a summary of the events that occurred at our home as best as I can recall, and not meant to be a detailed account of everything that took place, as well as a brief, relevant family history. Background and family history. My father, Martin van Breda, date of birth 5 August 1960, married my mother, Teresa Jacoba van Breda, near the Toy, date of birth 19 June 1959, on 16 February 1990. My oldest brother, Rudy, was born on 10 July 1992. Subsequently, 2 further children were born from the union. I was born on 1 November 1994, and my sister, Marley, on 12 October 1998. All three of us were born in Pretoria. I commenced my schooling at Woodhill College, Pretoria during January 2001. In the beginning of 2006, our family emigrated to Perth, Australia. Here I was enrolled as a grade 6 learner at the Loreto Primary School. In 2007, I transferred to Scotch College, where I eventually matriculated in 2012. In 2011, Rudy took up his tertiary studies at the University of Melbourne, studying mechanical engineering, and in 2013, I enrolled at the same university to study physics. During that year, our family moved from Perth to Buderim. During January 2014, my parents and Mudley moved back to South Africa, where they initially resided in Gordons Bay. Rudy and I accompanied them, but we only stayed in South Africa for the duration of a university break, whereafter we returned to Melbourne, Australia. My parents and Mudley's relocation occurred principally because my father had launched a new school project in South Africa, which he labelled EduGrow. This venture had grown and was increasingly demanding his full and undivided attention. In addition, my mother missed her family and she yearned to be closer to them. At that juncture, Rudy and I remained in Melbourne as we were still busy with our respective studies. In 2014, my parents enrolled Mudley at Somerset College. During about March 2014, my parents and Mudley moved from Gordons Bay to 12 Gosper Street, Desolagov, Wynets Estate. Towards the middle of 2014, I temporarily halted my studies at the University of Melbourne with the view of taking a gap year. Subsequently, in August 2014, I also moved to Desalza, where I joined my parents and Mudley. In December 2014, Rudy came to visit us at the family home in Desalza for the summer holiday during his university break. He was set to return to Melbourne to recommence his studies at the end of February 2015. At that juncture, I intended to attend a scuba diving course at the start of 2015 on the north coast of Natal. They enjoyed doing things together. We especially enjoyed doing outdoor activities as a family, like shark cage diving, boating, water skiing and fishing. The events of 27 January 2015. There was nothing out of the ordinary the evening before the attack. Before dinner, my dad opened a bottle of wine for us. He, Rudy and I watched television whilst my mom made dinner. As far as I can recall, Mudley was in the room. After dinner, Rudy, my dad and I watched the movie Star Trek 2. I recall that my mom spent some time on the phone with her brother, but I'm not sure what else she was busy with that night. After the movie, Rudy, Dad and I said goodnight. We all usually slept with our bedroom doors open. Rudy and I turned off the lights and got into bed. Initially, Rudy and I were both busy on our laptops. However, Rudy was asleep shortly after getting into bed. I stayed up watching an animated show called One Piece. Brackets, One Piece is a light-hearted animated show about pirates with special powers. Close brackets. At some point, long after we went to bed, I went to the bathroom to use the toilet as I had to move my bowels. I took my cell phone with... Sorry, no?
I think the E now.
Quite right. I apologize for that. I took my cell phone with to play games. I did not switch on the lights in the bathroom. I'm unsure of how long I was in the bathroom when I suddenly heard several banging sounds that sounded close by. The sounds were so loud and strange that it startled me into investigating the source thereof. I stood up, pulled up my pants, and moved towards the bathroom door, which was only partially closed. I opened the bathroom door and looked in the direction of the banging sounds, which emanated from the vicinity of Rudy's bed. I could make out the silhouette of someone standing next to, brackets, between our two beds, close brackets, or partially on Rudy's bed. This person was busy attacking Rudy with an object which later transpired to be an axe. I initially stood frozen, trying to comprehend what was going on. I shouted for help, hoping to attract attention. I cannot remember what words I used. I also cannot recall whether I remained in the same position throughout the attack on Rudy. The bedroom lights were suddenly switched on and my dad came into the room. At this stage, the attack with the axe on Rudy was still going on. As far as I could see, the attacker was dressed in dark clothes and he wore gloves and a balaclava type mask. My dad immediately moved towards and onto the bed over Rudy, towards the attacker, who was on the opposite side of the bed. It looked as if he was trying to tackle the attacker, or at least get between the attacker and Rudy. However, my dad was struck with the axe as he lunged towards the attacker. His body went limp on the bed, and I did not see him move again. Despite this, he was hit a number of times by the attacker with the axe. I also recall that the attacker was laughing whilst he attacked my dad. I suddenly heard my mom's voice outside my room saying, "Wat gaan hier aan?" I assumed that the attacker must have heard it too, because he then left the room. I could not see what happened outside the room as my view of the door was obstructed by our bedroom wall. The attacker remained outside my field of vision for some time. I am unsure how long, but it was not long. I cannot recall whether I heard any sound of an attack on my mom outside of our room. The attacker then came back into the room and slowly came at me. At that stage, I was standing close to the bottom end of my bed. He was laughing and seemed almost unconcerned about my presence. I stepped forward and grabbed his wrist and right hand, in which he was carrying the axe, with both my hands. I managed to wrestle the axe from his grip and shove him away from me towards the bottom end of Rudy's bed. As a result of the push, he spun around and away from me. I was surprised at how easy I was able to disarm him. I remember seeing Rudy moving on his bed in my peripheral vision. He was also making what seemed like gurgling noises. The attacker came at me again. He grabbed my right forearm in which I was holding the axe. At the same time, he lifted his right hand, and I then saw he had a knife in his right hand. I do not know where he got the knife from, or when and how he got in possession of the knife. His attack was slow again, and I was able to grab his knife forearm, his right hand, with my left. We pushed and pulled one another, stepping back and forth next to the gap between the feet of the beds. He cut and slashed at my chest and also stabbed at my chest. He also slashed at my left arm. I was still holding on to his right forearm, which prevented him from inflicting serious harm. He then moved his knife arm in a way that just twisted my left hand counterclockwise. This hurt my hand and arm. He started to stab at me with a knife, but initially I was still able to prevent him from stabbing me. I realized that I would not be able to keep a grip with my hand twisted and hurting, so I struck his right shoulder with the axe in an attempt to make him let go of the knife. Despite this, he managed to stab me with the knife on my left side, almost at the same time that I struck him with the axe. It was only at this point that I realized that I was holding the axe backwards, as a result of which I struck him with the blunt sides of the axe. After I struck him, he let go of the knife in my right arm and retreated. I immediately pulled the knife out of my side and dropped it. I presume somewhere on the floor, but I don't know exactly where. The attacker fled out of the room. I hesitated a moment and followed him. I remember seeing Rudy from my peripheral view moving around in his bed rather violently. I also recall hearing what sounded like angry voices of more than one person somewhere else in the house. Although I could not distinguish specific words, it sounded like the persons were speaking Afrikaans. As I went out the room, I recall having a glimpse of Marley and my mom lying immediately outside the bedroom door on the top landing connecting our bedrooms. I was later shown photographs that were apparently taken of Marley and my mom by Sergeant Kleinhans, one of the first police officers on the scene. I cannot say exactly where they were or what their exact position was outside the room when I exited it, but I can definitely say that Marley's feet were not in the same place as they are on Kleinhans's photographs. I saw the attacker near the middle landing of the flight of stairs. I'm not a fast runner and did not think I would be able to catch him. I then threw the axe at him. I cannot recall exactly where I was on the stairs when I threw the axe. I also did not see where or what the axe struck. During my pursuit of the attacker, I lost my footing and fell down the stairs. I do not know what made me fall, but my fall was quite severe. I got up and moved towards the kitchen area. I saw that the kitchen door was open. At that stage, I did not know how many persons had been in the house, but there must have been at least 2. I went out the back door only far enough to look down the side of the wall of the house. I could not see anyone and went back inside the house. I then realized that I had my phone on me in the pocket of my sleeping shorts. Although I have no independent recollection thereof, I assume that I must have placed my phone in the pocket of my pants when I got up from the toilet. I wanted to call the emergency services, but I had no idea of the number. I then tried to call my girlfriend Bianca, but could not get hold of her. I cannot recall whether it rang or whether it went straight to voicemail. I also tried to Google the emergency number on my phone. I recall seeing that the light of the downstairs study was on. I started going up the stairs and could hear Rudy in the bedroom. As I moved past the middle landing of the stairs towards the top, I saw Mudley moving about on the top landing line next to my mom. My mom was not moving. The last thing I recall seeing is Mudley and my mom. I then lost consciousness. I am unsure whether it was due to the shock or to the injuries that I sustained when I fell down the stairs, or a combination of both. I later woke lying on the stairs. I am unsure for how long I was unconscious, but from the light outside, I could see that it was already light. Initially, I was disorientated and not at all sure that what I remembered was real. I then saw Mudley moving. She was lying next to my mom on the landing upstairs. I could also hear what sounded like Rudy making gurgled sounds in the room. I also recall seeing blood on the vertical side of one of the stairs where I had lain. I assumed that this must have been my own blood. Part of the stairs. I went down the stairs and picked it up because I wanted to phone an ambulance. I looked at the emergency numbers on the fridge door, but they did not appear to me to be of any assistance. I then found an emergency number on my mobile phone and tried calling that number from my mobile phone. I'm unsure exactly how many times I tried calling, but from my cell phone records provided by the state, it appears as if I tried calling this number twice, both times unsuccessfully. I then decided to call the same number on our landline from the cordless telephone. It was lying on the kitchen counter. At that stage, I was panicking. I was concerned that if I panicked on the phone, I would not be able to successfully communicate with the operator. I then lit a cigarette at the kitchen counter to try and remain calm whilst I was dialing the emergency number on our landline from the cordless telephone and got through to the operator. I knew from past experience that people in South Africa sometimes had difficulty understanding my Australian accent. I also sometimes had difficulty following South African English speaking. I also severely stuttered as a child to the extent that I had to receive speech therapy. At times, I still stutter. My stutter worsens when I'm under stress. In addition, I also have a tendency to mumble. One of the techniques taught to me to overcome the stutter was to speak slowly and calmly. When the phone was answered, I therefore tried to speak as calmly and clearly as possible. However, I still struggled for a very long time trying to get the operator to send an ambulance. She seemed confused for various reasons, and I was trying my best to formulate a plan to get help as soon as possible. Whilst I was on the phone to the emergency operator, I tried to call Bianca again, but she did not answer. From the information supplied by the state, it appears that I attempted to phone her more than once. Although I cannot recall exactly how many times I tried to phone her that morning, I do not dispute this. I also recall that I eventually sent her a WhatsApp message. I told the operator of the address I found on Google Maps on my mobile phone that would take the ambulance past our house, namely Alleman Street. I went outside via the front door whilst still on the phone to the operator and told them I can signal to the ambulance if it is on its way to the address shown on Google Maps. I also recall that when I was outside, I noticed someone. As far as I can recall, I requested this person to get help. I cannot recall who this person was. At some stage, I went back into the house via the front door. When the first police officers arrived, I met them at the front door and told them to go upstairs. Once they arrived, the adrenaline and the feeling that I should be doing something to help started to dissipate, and I could feel myself going into shock. I was later taken to an ambulance where my stab wound was dressed. Photographs were taken of my injuries. At some stage, the police took my grey sleeping pants and white socks that I was wearing, leaving me dressed only in boxer shorts. I was then led to a police double cab bakkie by 2 police officers. I later learned that one of them was Sergeant Adams. I'm unsure, but I think that the other police officer was Sergeant Apollos. I was directed to the back seat and I was told that I was being taken for medical attention. The officers asked if I speak Afrikaans. I said I wasn't comfortable with Afrikaans and preferred English. They inquired about the race of my attackers. I replied that I only saw one and that I think that the one I saw was black. I overheard them saying that Muddy had been administered a drug that makes her, inverted commas, wide awake and telling us everything, close inverted commas. I inquired about my family members, but they refused to provide me with any details. We first went to a police station in the middle of Stellenbosch. One police officer got out and returned with plastic bags and some documents. They then took me to a doctor. She began filling out a document, which she referred to as a J88, on which she noted my injuries. At one point, one of the officers asked the doctor in Afrikaans if it would be possible to say if my wounds were self-inflicted. I cannot recall which one of them asked the question. The doctor replied in Afrikaans that she sal sien wat ons kan doen. From the doctor's rooms, I was taken to the detective's offices, where I was made to wait in a communal office with officers coming and going, dressed only in my underpants. At some stage, I was given cigarettes. When an officer returned with food and drinks, for the rest of them, I was only given a bottle of Coke. I'm also unsure what time this happened. They then moved me to another office, which had the air conditioning turned down to make the room ice cold. I was visibly shivering from the cold. After waiting in this office with police officers around for a while, a large man arrived, whom I later learned was Colonel Beneke. Colonel Beneke came in, poured himself a Coke, and without introducing himself, told me that he, quote, does not believe a word of my bullshit story. At his request, I repeated to him what had happened a number of times. During this time, I repeatedly inquired about my family, but was denied any information. At some stage, Colonel Beneke also said that Muddy was telling him everything and asked me whether my version would be the same as hers, to which I replied yes. I was asked one last time to repeat what had happened, and Colonel Beneke then instructed the fellow officer to take down my statement. Colonel Beneke then instructed this officer to have my statement typed up and told me that I may leave as soon as I have signed it. I waited in a tiny office with a computer and printer for the officer to type of what he either had written down earlier or what he recalled from memory. By the time that the statement was being typed up, I was extremely exhausted, amongst others due to the fact that I had not slept for a long period of time. I was also still in shock. The last time that I had anything to eat was the previous evening. At that stage, I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. Although my statement was not correct in all the aspects, I didn't want to sit around correcting the officers and reliving the trauma of the night before with another retelling of what had happened. Although the gist of what was written down is correct, the statement does contain some inaccuracies and also does not contain all the detailed information that I conveyed to the officers. It also contains a number of grammatical errors, probably due to the fact that the statement is a paraphrased version by an Afrikaans-speaking officer. Whilst I was recounting the events of the night before, Colonel Beneke insisted that I be specific about things after I made it very clear to him that I could not confidently be that specific about certain aspects, like what time I got up to go to the toilet, what time we had dinner, and what we had to drink the previous evening. With the benefit of hindsight, it is clear that the police viewed me as a suspect in the matter very soon after they arrived on the scene. After I was charged, a copy of the contents of the police docket was provided to my legal representatives. It then became clear to me that the police had utilized the contents of my statement, that I provided them under the circumstances set out above as the basis for charging me by, amongst others, obtaining the opinion of various expert witnesses to gainsay the contents of the statement. At no stage did any of the officers warn me that I had a right to remain silent or that I had a right to legal representation before I was asked for an explanation. Had I realized at the time that the police would be using the statement as evidence against me, I would most certainly have asked for an opportunity to consult with the legal representative. Although I have nothing to hide, we would probably have provided them with my version. I would have been able to provide a far more accurate and comprehensive version than the one contained in the statement. I'm severely prejudiced by the fact that the police are now holding me to each and every word contained in the statement that was taken from me under the circumstances set out above. Conclusion, I accordingly deny that I'm guilty of the offences with which I have been charged. Admissions. In an attempt to shorten proceedings, I've made a number of admissions in terms of Section 220 of the Criminal Procedure Act, number 51 of 1977, which will be handed to this Honourable Court in a separate document. Insofar as my plea explanation contains admissions, I hereby consent to these admissions to be recorded as formal admissions in terms of Section 220 of the Criminal Procedure Act. The sign of my question, my Lord, this morning by my client. My Lord, with regards to, before I ask the Lordship to accept this as an exhibit, between my learned colleague and myself, we've already started locating exhibit numbers to document. My learned colleague tends to hand up a photographic album that contains exhibits A to I, and therefore I would ask that this be, with your Lordship's leave, of course, be admitted as exhibit J, just to follow chronological order of the other documents that we have at the later stage.
Mr. van Breda, please rise. Mr. van Breda, you deliver to counsel as read out.
Yes.
You confirm the correctness of that document? Yes. Is there anything you wish to change? Was this document freely and voluntarily issued? Is the content of the document was that freely and voluntarily verified? Yes. There are no objection to